I never expected this. Standing there on the phone with Daniel, listening to his words, the world around me suddenly felt like it was closing in. My hand, the one holding the phone, started to shake, and I quickly gripped it tighter, as if trying to stop the tremors from giving away the chaos building inside me. My breath became shallow. How had we gotten here? How had he gotten here? Yeah, James, about that. You're not invited to the wedding. I'm sorry. The words hung in the air like a weight I couldn't shake off. I didn't even know how to react. The phone felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds in my hand. I swallowed, trying to ignore the knot tightening in my throat. Not invited? I repeated, hoping the words sounded more confident than they felt. My voice, however, was barely above a whisper. Why? There was a long pause on the other end of the line. For a split second, I almost thought I'd heard the sound of a sigh, a shift in the tension. Then Daniel's voice came back, cold, distant. It's just, we've had to limit the guest list and, well, it just seemed better this way. Better? The words felt like a slap across the face. Better? Had I become some afterthought in his life? The friend who had been there through thick and thin, through the broken relationships, the late-night talks, the drunken ramblings, and all the moments in between? Was that all just nothing? I couldn't understand it. My chest tightened, and I felt a cold sweat start to form at the back of my neck. James, I didn't want to hurt you, but... He trailed off. The rest of his sentence felt like it faded into the distance, like his words didn't matter anymore. They were just noise, empty echoes that bounced off the walls of my mind, getting lost in the chaos I was feeling. How could he say this to me? How could he do this? Why didn't you tell me earlier? The question came out of me before I could even stop it, the rawness of my emotions spilling out like I couldn't contain them anymore. My stomach twisted. This was supposed to be my best friend, my brother, and now I was just left out. I didn't know how to bring it up, Daniel said quietly, his words lacking the warmth I had expected. His voice sounded strained, like it didn't want to give too much away. And that's when it hit me, the hesitation in his tone, the nervousness. This wasn't about the wedding at all. This was about something deeper. But I didn't know what. The silence between us felt heavy, suffocating. I looked down at the floor, my hands gripping the edge of the table. The room was still, except for the sound of my heart thumping in my ears, trying to drown out the sting of his words. My mind raced. How could I be left out of something so important to him? We'd been through everything together. How had I become invisible? I felt something sharp twist in my chest. I understand, I said, my voice barely audible, my words thick with the weight of everything I couldn't express. It was a lie I didn't understand, not one bit, but I had no choice but to accept it, to take the blow and move on. I heard Daniel's voice falter on the other end of the line. James, he started, but I couldn't bear to hear it. I couldn't bear to hear any more of his excuses, his apologies. It wasn't going to change anything, not anymore. So I cut the call short, my thumb hovering over the end button for just a moment longer than necessary before I pressed it, ending the conversation. The room felt quieter now, even though the silence between us had been broken. I stood there, phone still in hand, staring at the dark screen. The anger was bubbling up inside me now, but I couldn't let it show. I had to keep it together. But why did it hurt so much? Why did his words feel like they dug deeper than I ever imagined? Was I not enough? And yet, in that quiet moment, something shifted. The pain, the confusion, the anger, they all mixed together into a single thought. I wasn't going to let this destroy me. I was still James, still me, and no matter what Daniel had decided, I wasn't going to let him dictate my worth. But as I stood there, staring at the phone, something unexpected began to form in my mind. A decision. A way to take control back. I wasn't invited? Fine. But I wasn't going to just fade away. No, I had a plan now, and no one, least of all Daniel, was going to take that away from me. The tension in my chest loosened, replaced by something else. Determination. I stood there in the silence of my apartment, the sting of Daniel's words still echoing in my ears. The cool air from the open window brushed against my skin, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The world outside seemed to move on, indifferent to the storm brewing inside me. It was as if time itself had slowed, just for me to try to understand what had just happened. But no matter how many times I replayed the conversation, I couldn't make sense of it. I paced back and forth, trying to clear my head. This wasn't supposed to be how things went. Not with Daniel. Not with the guy I'd known since I was 10 years old. We'd built our lives side by side, sharing experiences that felt like they defined us. Late-night talks about our future. Drunken nights where we'd laugh about things we couldn't even remember the next day, and every small victory along the way. I thought about the wedding announcement a few months ago. Daniel had called me excitedly, his voice nearly bursting through the phone. "Man, I'm getting married. Can you believe it?" he'd said. I'd been ecstatic for him. He'd found someone who made him happier than I'd ever seen him, and as his best friend, I'd naturally been included in all the plans. I wasn't just a plus one. I was going to be there with him, celebrating this huge step in his life. At least, that's what I thought. But now? Now, everything felt different. My chest tightened with the weight of unanswered questions. Why hadn't he told me sooner? Why hadn't he been honest? If he'd had reservations about our friendship, why hadn't he said something? Or maybe I had missed something. Maybe all the years of friendship had been nothing more than a facade, a comfortable routine that he'd finally outgrown. The worst part wasn't just being left out. It was the realization that maybe, just maybe, I'd never been as close to him as I thought. The more I tried to piece together the puzzle of our friendship, the more the edges didn't fit. I kept replaying the times we'd spent together in recent months, how he'd been a little distant, a little more preoccupied with his fiancée than with our usual hangouts. At the time, I'd told myself it was just wedding stress, that he was busy with all the preparations. But now I couldn't ignore it. The distance had been there, creeping in, and I had been too blind to see it. I leaned against the window, looking out at the city below. The streetlights cast a soft glow against the darkening sky, and the sound of traffic was a constant hum. But even the normal buzz of the city couldn't drown out the question swirling in my mind. What did I do wrong? I shook my head, trying to push the thought away. I couldn't keep doing this. I couldn't let myself spiral into self-doubt. Daniel might have made his decision, but that didn't mean I had to live by it. I glanced over at the clock on the wall. It was getting late. I hadn't even eaten dinner yet, but I couldn't bring myself to care. Food seemed trivial now. The only thing on my mind was this weird, nagging feeling that I wasn't just hurt, I was being pushed aside. And that wasn't going to happen, not without me putting up a fight. I could feel a spark of defiance rising within me, something I hadn't expected. Maybe this was the push I needed to prove something to myself, to prove that I wasn't someone to be tossed aside so easily. It wasn't about the wedding anymore. It wasn't about the invitation or the guest list. It was about me showing up in a way that would make Daniel realize something he hadn't yet figured out. I wasn't just going to disappear. I wasn't going to let him make me feel small. And maybe, just maybe, showing up would be the statement I needed to make. The days after that phone call felt like they dragged on, one after another, as if the universe itself had slowed to remind me of the betrayal. I couldn't escape the thought of it. Every time I went about my usual routine, Daniel's words echoed in my head. "You're not invited." Over and over again, replaying in an endless loop until the weight of it was suffocating. I tried to distract myself, went out with friends, binge-watched shows to numb my mind, but nothing worked. Nothing stopped the creeping realization that something was broken, not just between Daniel and me, but within myself. The deeper I dug into the situation, the more questions arose. Why hadn't I seen the signs? What had changed in our friendship? Had he grown tired of me? Was I too much? I kept telling myself it was just a wedding, that it didn't really matter. People change, relationships evolve. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just about the wedding. This was bigger. There was something else happening here. Something I wasn't seeing. One night, I sat in the dim glow of my apartment, the weight of the quiet pressing on me. I stared at my phone, scrolling mindlessly through social media, posts about Daniel's wedding coming up, engagement photos, posts of his fiancée glowing in her white dress. It was like salt in an open wound. I could feel the bitterness building inside me, but I didn't want to admit it. I didn't want to feel like the angry ex-friend. But how could I not? I tossed my phone aside and leaned back, trying to clear my mind. I needed to do something, anything. I couldn't let this go without confronting it. I wasn't just going to sit back and be excluded, no matter how justified Daniel thought his actions were. If he was going to cut me out of his life without an explanation, then maybe I should make him realize how big of a mistake that was. The idea hit me like a bolt of lightning, and I sat up, wide-eyed, as if I'd just discovered some great truth. I wasn't going to just let this slide. No, I was going to do something that would leave a mark, something that would make him rethink this whole situation. I thought about it for a while. How I would do it, what I would say. It didn't have to be a grand gesture or an angry confrontation. It could be something simple, yet powerful. I wasn't going to beg for an invite. I wasn't going to show up and demand attention, but I was going to show him that he couldn't just erase me from the story of his life, not without facing the consequences. I'd show up to the reception. I'd walk into that room like I belonged there. I'd be dressed to the nines, with a gift in hand, ready to make a statement that wasn't about revenge. It was about my own dignity. I would show him that I wasn't crushed, that I wasn't going to cower because of his decision. And if that made him uncomfortable, well, that was his problem, not mine. I picked up my phone again, this time with a clear sense of purpose. I needed to find the perfect gift, something meaningful, something that said, "I'm here, I see you, and I'm not going anywhere." A bottle of wine? Too impersonal? A framed photo of us together? Too sentimental? Then it hit me. The perfect gift. Something that represented all of our years of friendship. A custom watch, engraved with a message he would understand. I smiled to myself, feeling a rush of energy. I had a plan. I wasn't just going to fade into the background. I was going to take control of this situation, make my own choices. If Daniel didn't want me at his wedding, fine. But I wasn't going to disappear from his life without making my presence known. I spent the next few days getting ready. The watch was delivered to my apartment, the suit was tailored, and I made sure every detail was in place. I practiced the speech in my head, imagining how I'd walk into the reception, how I'd greet him with that calm, composed smile. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't bitter. I was just moving forward. The night of the wedding arrived, and as I stood in front of the mirror, adjusting my tie and smoothing out the creases in my suit, I realized something. This wasn't about Daniel anymore. This wasn't even about the wedding. It was about me. About proving to myself that I wasn't defined by anyone else's choices. I was my own person, and I wasn't going to let his exclusion destroy me. I took a deep breath and grabbed the gift. I wasn't sure what would happen next, but I was ready. Whatever came next, I was going to face it with my head held high. The drive to the venue felt surreal. The roads were empty, the evening sky bathed in the soft glow of the setting sun, and yet every mile felt like a countdown. I could feel my heart racing, my palms slick with sweat, but it wasn't fear. It was something else. It was anticipation. I was heading into unknown territory, into a situation I'd never imagined I'd find myself in. I turned the corner, and there it was. The grand wedding venue, lit up like something out of a dream. The ornate doors were wide open, inviting all the guests who had been included, those who had received their precious invitations. I parked my car, the sound of the engine dying as the silence crept back in. I took one last look at the gift sitting in the passenger seat, the wrapped box with the custom watch I'd poured so much thought into. My fingers brushed against the cool paper, the ribbon tied so perfectly, and for a second, I felt that old wave of doubt wash over me. Was I doing the right thing? What would happen if Daniel saw me there? Would he be mad? Would he be embarrassed? I swallowed hard, trying to push the doubts away. I was doing this for me. I had to remind myself that this wasn't about getting revenge. It wasn't about showing him up. It was about asserting my own worth. It was about proving that I wasn't going to crumble just because I'd been excluded. I wasn't just some extra in the background of his life anymore. I wasn't invisible. I stepped out of the car, straightening my suit, and felt the cool evening air rush over me. The crowd inside the venue was barely audible from the outside, but I knew it was happening. Daniel's wedding was happening without me being part of it. I tried to shake the emotion away and focus on what I needed to do. As I approached the entrance, I hesitated just for a moment. The grand doors loomed ahead, and for a fleeting second, I wondered if I should just turn around, go home, and forget this whole thing. What would people say? What would Daniel say? But the voice inside my head, the one that had been growing louder and louder ever since I'd made the decision, pushed me forward. This wasn't about fear. This wasn't about whether or not I was welcome. It was about showing up for myself. I walked through the doors, my footsteps heavy but deliberate. Immediately, the room seemed to freeze. Heads turned. There was a collective intake of breath as I walked in. Some faces were confused, others were shocked, and some seemed downright uncomfortable. I could feel the weight of their stares, their judgment. But I didn't let it stop me. I didn't falter. I walked in with a purpose, my eyes scanning the room until I found Daniel. He was talking to someone, his back to me. I felt a surge of something. Anger, maybe, but also something else. Something that felt like a slow building satisfaction. Because I wasn't the one who had to feel awkward in that moment. It was him. I approached him slowly, my heart beating faster with every step. I knew that this was the moment. This was the confrontation that would either break me or prove to me that I was stronger than I'd ever realized. I stopped right in front of him. He turned, his eyes widening as they locked with mine. His face instantly paled, the color draining from his cheeks as the reality of my presence hit him. "James?" he stammered, his voice betraying the unease that he'd been trying to hide. What are you doing here?" The silence that followed was thick, suffocating. I could feel everyone around us, watching, waiting. The tension was palpable. But I kept my composure, a calm smile crossing my lips as I held out the gift. "Congratulations, Daniel," I said, my voice steady. though I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. "I'm really happy for you." He glanced down at the gift in my hands, his face a mixture of confusion and guilt. For a moment, I thought he might say something more, but instead he just stared, speechless. I didn't wait for him to respond. I wasn't here for apologies or explanations. I was here to show him that no matter what happened, no matter how he'd tried to push me out, I was still a part of his life. I wasn't going anywhere, and I would never let him make me feel small again. With the gift still in my hands, I took a deep breath and nodded, then turned away and walked deeper into the room. The silence lingered behind me, but I didn't care. I wasn't looking for his validation anymore. I wasn't seeking his approval. I was doing this for myself. As I mingled with the guests, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted, not just in the room, but in me. There was an air of unease, yes, but there was also a quiet satisfaction. I had taken control. I had shown up. And now, there was no going back. The room buzzed with quiet chatter, but the moment I stepped further into the reception hall, it felt like everything had shifted. Every person I passed, every whisper I caught, seemed to carry the same unspoken question. What was I doing here? I could feel the weight of their stares on my back, but I didn't care. It wasn't about them. It wasn't about their judgment or how uncomfortable this made them. It was about Daniel and what was coming next. I found a spot near the edge of the crowd, standing by a table full of appetizers. The room was filled with laughter, the clinking of glasses and the soft strains of a string quartet playing in the background. But none of that could drown out the racing of my heartbeat. I looked around, searching for Daniel's face in the sea of guests, but he wasn't at the center of the room where I expected. Then I spotted him. He was standing by the bar, deep in conversation with his fiancée, Sarah. I could see their body language, how she clung to his side, her eyes darting over to me from time to time. I don't think she was fully prepared for me to be there, not like this. Her smile faltered as she noticed me, and I caught the briefest flicker of confusion in her eyes. But it wasn't her I was interested in right now. It was Daniel. I took a deep breath, gathering my thoughts. My eyes locked with his, and for a moment I saw it. The guilt, the hesitation in his gaze. His posture stiffened as he turned toward me, the conversation between him and Sarah faltering. He didn't say anything, not at first. His mouth opened as if to speak, but the words didn't come. I wasn't going to let him off the hook. Not this time. I walked toward him slowly, my hands trembling slightly as I held the gift tightly. My chest tightened with every step, but I refused to let the anxiety consume me. This was the moment. This was my decision, no going back now. "James," he finally said, his voice soft, almost apologetic. "What are you doing here?" I could feel the eyes of everyone around us on me, waiting for me to answer. The tension between us was thick enough to cut with a knife. The room felt like it had gone silent, even though the music and chatter still swirled around us. I was hyper-aware of the silence that had fallen over us. I looked at Daniel and smiled, but there was something different in my expression this time. It wasn't a smile of forgiveness. It wasn't a smile of anger either. It was the smile of someone who had nothing left to prove. "I'm here to celebrate you, Daniel," I said, my voice steady. "I'm here to show up, even if I wasn't invited. Because you're my best friend, and I think that's something that matters." Daniel's face twitched slightly, like he didn't know how to respond. His eyes shifted to the gift in my hands, and I could see him swallow hard, as if trying to gather his thoughts. But he was lost. The shock was clear on his face, the guilt, too. I extended the gift to him, my hand steady despite the storm of emotions raging inside me. "Congratulations," I said again, a little louder this time. I hope this is a great start to your new life. For a long moment, Daniel didn't reach for it. He just stared at me, his mouth opening and closing like he wanted to say something but didn't know how. The awkwardness between us was palpable, and I knew it was hitting him harder than it was hitting me. This wasn't just about me showing up. This was about him realizing the weight of what he'd done. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, he took the gift from me. His fingers brushed against mine, and for a second, the usual warmth we shared in those small exchanges was gone. His eyes were filled with confusion, maybe even a bit of regret. "I'm sorry, man," he murmured, his voice breaking through the tension. "I never meant to hurt you. But I stopped him. I didn't need his apology. I didn't need him to explain why he'd made the decision to exclude me. I didn't need to hear the excuses anymore. "It's okay," I said, cutting him off. "You don't have to explain it to me. I just needed to show up, for me, not for you. I needed to prove to myself that I'm not invisible." There was a pause, and for a brief moment I thought I saw a flicker of understanding in his eyes. The guilt was still there, but something shifted. I could tell he wasn't expecting this, wasn't prepared for me to handle it with such calmness. I turned to leave him, to step back into the crowd, but not before I heard him call out to me. "James, wait." I didn't turn around. I couldn't, not yet, but the weight that had been pressing on my chest for days, for weeks, seemed to lift just a little bit. The air felt lighter. I'd done it. I had shown up for myself, and I knew that no matter what happened from here on out, Daniel wouldn't be able to erase me from his life so easily. I wasn't the same person I had been before this night. I was stronger, more certain of who I was. And I was no longer afraid to stand in the spotlight, no longer afraid to claim my place, even if it wasn't the place I expected. The rest of the night was a blur. I mingled, chatted with a few people, smiled through the awkwardness, but my mind was still focused on that moment. The moment when I stood in front of Daniel, offered him the gift, and let him see me. Really see me. It wasn't just about showing up to the wedding. It was about showing up for myself, proving that I wasn't going to let anyone dictate my worth, not even someone who had been my best friend for so long. I could still feel the tension in the air, the whispers that followed me as I moved through the room. But it didn't matter anymore. I was no longer part of their gossip, part of the drama that had been swirling around me in my own mind for days. I had stepped out of the shadows, and in doing so, I had reclaimed my power. I kept telling myself that the night was over, that it had all been a statement, a confrontation that needed to happen. But deep down, I knew it wasn't just about Daniel or Sarah or the people in that room. It was about me, about realizing that no matter how much someone might try to push you aside, you get to decide how much space you take up in the world. You get to decide whether you stay down or get back up. As the night wound down and people started heading for the exits, I found myself standing by the door, watching everyone leave, including Daniel. He'd said his goodbyes earlier, but I noticed he didn't even look at me as he passed by. It stung, but this time I didn't let it hurt. I had walked into this reception feeling like a stranger, like I didn't belong. But by the time I left, I felt something else. I felt like I had earned my place, not in the way I had expected, not as a guest or a +1 or even as the best man, but as someone who refused to fade into the background, who refused to let someone's decision about me define who I was. I didn't need to be invited into this part of Daniel's life to know my worth. I'd learned something important that night. Sometimes people will hurt you, they'll exclude you, and it'll feel like the end of everything. But if you choose to rise above it, to stand tall despite the hurt, that's when you really start to grow. I didn't walk away from that wedding broken. I didn't leave with a heavy heart or bitterness. I left with clarity. I realized that true strength isn't in how others see you. It's in how you see yourself. And no matter how much Daniel tried to push me out, I knew I wasn't going anywhere. Not in the way he thought. As I made my way back to the car, the night air felt cool against my skin, a stark contrast to the heat of the emotions I had just faced. I felt lighter, like something had lifted off my shoulders. I wasn't the victim in this story. I wasn't the guy who got left behind. I was the one who showed up. I was the one who took control of my own narrative. And that felt pretty damn good. The lesson was clear. When someone tries to erase you, don't let them. Show up for yourself, even when no one else does. Because at the end of the day, you're the one who decides your story. And no one, not even your best friend, can take that away from you. And with that, the story ends. I hope you enjoyed the journey. Feel free to reach out if you need any adjustments or if you'd like to dive into another project.